Assalamu alaikum everyone. I welcome you all to the second session of Legally Updated, a flagship project of the Legal Awareness and Digital Education Department of the Youth General Assembly Legal Forum, where we bring an impartial and unbiased analysis of recent constitutional and legal developments. Very recently, only yesterday, the Islamabad High Court finally ruled that the Peca Ordinance 2022, which was promulgated in February to curb the growing spread of fake news, is ultra vires to the Constitution and, in particular, Article 19 and Article 19A. To discuss this, we have with us an expert on this matter, Mr. Khurram Chugtai, who is an advocate of the Supreme Court and has an elaborate experience with cybercrime and cybersecurity laws. So, Khurram, I'm very grateful to have you today with us on this amazing and as part of this amazing conversation that we're going to have. Thank you so much for your time, and apologies you had to deal with a bit of inconvenience at our end.
Thank you, Rifat. Thanks for having me. So
So we would like
I
to
have read
move
the
towards the
judgment. I
first
have
question.
read, yeah, I have read all those petitions, and there have been different set of proceedings for last 5 years. And before the PICA in 2016, there were consultative sessions in Standing Committee of National Assembly and at Ministry of Information Technology and so I believe there is a disconnect between our local legal and regulatory regime and the international norms. So,
So, mashallah, you have a great experience there. So, I would like to start with the first question for this session. So, what was this Peca Ordinance all about? If you could briefly reflect upon the provisions of this Peca Ordinance and what it aimed to accomplish.
firstly, the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act 2016. It actually replaced the earlier cybercrime ordinance of 2007. There were earlier provisions. So first law was 2002 electronic transaction ordinance. There were only two penal provisions. Later on, in 2007, in emergency regime, a law was introduced through an ordinance which was declared ultra vires in 2009 by a judgment of Supreme Court. For almost 7 years, we had no cyber crime or electronic crime uh, law in Pakistan. So it started with 2004-14 draft, and up till 2016, there was a law. A massive consultative process was done. Although civil society and different organizations from the civil side, like Digital Rights and Byte for All, they were not very happy, and me as a lawyer, I was not happy too. But there was some effort to start a legislative framework for cyber crimes. So we had that, and that was massively misused by different regimes. So that's why that PICA, the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act of 2016, always remained a controversy. During that controversy, different criminal legal proceedings were initiated against journalists, politicians, and civil rights activists. Later on, the institutions were maligned, like judiciary, armed forces, government. So government felt the need that there should be a law to protect the institutions as well. Rightly or wrongly, there was a law of criminal defamation on online for individuals, natural persons. But through PICA Ordinance 2021, they introduced a penal provisions for maligning or making ridicule to the institutions. And every individual was given a right to institute legal proceeding. That was the core point. That was the contention. The PICA Ordinance was challenged. And after lengthy legal proceedings, before the Honorable Chief Justice of Islamabad High Court, that is declared ultra vires to the Article 19. So I have different view. It should be the digital space, digital media should be regulated or governed in an appropriate manner, considering our social norms. So there is a disconnect. We are trying to adopt the strict policing of liberal policing of West in Pakistan, where there is no law. So everybody is free to speak anything. How to regulate that? That is my question to the court.
Yeah, so that begs the question. We've talked about how this is ultra vires to the right to freedom of expression and the right to information as enshrined in the Constitution. So, sir, when you say that it is okay and you support the criminalization of this, or criminalization or over-regulation of digital spaces, what would be your interpretation of Article 19 and Article 19A of the Constitution?
Oh, I support the regulation. There should be a regulatory framework. There should be a governance framework. Everybody should not be free to speak anything. Even Article 19 is not an absolute right. There are certain conditions provided in Article 19. There are certain conditions provided in Article 19A. So if the Constitution is providing certain conditions, certain bars, the certain limits to the right of expression, right, freedom of expression. So how the courts can say that these conditions are misused, these limits can be misused. My actual question is merely on the ground of misuse. You can read the operative paragraph that the Peca Ordinance is against the spirit of the Constitution. I hope you have read that paragraph. It is against the scheme of the Constitution. What is the scheme of the Constitution? What is the salient feature of the Constitution? We have been hearing that this is against the same issue. In 2009, India introduced under their IT Act of 1999 to regulate digital spaces. The matter went to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court held this is intra-virus to regulate digital spaces. During that time, there was another case whereby criminalization of the defamation was challenged in Supreme Court of India by a leading jurist. Section 499-500 of Pakistan Penal Code, that is an Indian Penal Code there. So Supreme Court of India held this is not wrong to criminalize defamation, but merely on the ground of misuse. The Islamabad High Court introduced certain SOPs, standard operating procedures for registration of FIR, for investigation procedures. Those were not followed. Fair enough. There should have been a mechanism. The Honorable Islamabad High Court rightly declared that people should be inquired. There should be a clear investigation why these SOPs have not been followed by the investigating agencies. But let's see what happens in detailed judgment. This discussion that what is the constitutional basis of criminalization of free speech on digital media, this discussion is going on all over the world, and there is no control to that fake news. And there are two reports, very detailed reports from 2017 till 2022, recently February. There are almost 15,000 plus pages, different reports, white papers by UK Parliament, online harms, fake news. Same is the case with the UK Law Commission. They have written certain reports. India, online harms, Australia, a detailed legal framework is underway. They're also planning to regulate, govern the digital space. They are the most civilized societies. And there is a law in US as well. And as far as the criminal provisions are concerned, there are 17, 18 countries which are giving a penal consequences of any fake news or false speech. So we have to create a balance between false speech and free speech. We should not allow false speech unchecked. That is my view.
So, when we talk about the civil society, just bringing their perspective in, particularly journalists, they are of this view that this law is going to be used, if allowed, as a weapon against them to suppress and curb dissent. And this is something that is not acceptable in a democratic society. So, what would be a legal person's response to that who supports criminalization of defamation?
I believe the journalist community is right, saying that journalists should not be stopped and they should not be inquired about their sources or their news or the basis of their analysis. In UK, what they have done, they have excluded journalistic material from that domain. So what we could do in Pakistan, we could create an exception in law that these penal provisions should be there should have been a criteria upon whom these will be applicable. Like UK and Australia, the journalistic material, a journalist or a broadcast media, they have been excluded from that kind of governance or regulatory framework. But there is a regulatory framework. There is a policing on or there is a check in law in civilized world. Although civil societies like Article 19, they are opposing such regulation, and in UK there is there is a discussion going on whether such regulation should be allowed or not. But in a society like Pakistan, you just tweet something, you just post anything, and that post create an impact over human minds, general public, that builds an opinion. The time it vanishes, that opinion has worked enough. And how to control that? That is my question. There are certain things like last 2-3 days, you have been observing how Supreme Court is being maligned. The judges of Supreme Court, the memes against those judges. Fair enough, you in political sphere, in exercise of your political rights, everybody should have the right to criticize the government. This is the beauty of democracy. But there should be a right to criticize judgments of the court. But how we should be allowed to say these judges are like working on behalf of some agenda? So I believe there should be a check. There is a contempt of court law, and that very court, the Honorable Chief Justice of Islamabad High Court, is liberal, but he should have seen what is happening in our neighbor countries. There are judgments of Supreme Court creating a commission asking to regulate free speech or false in election, in politics. There are new penal laws, new penal provisions in India, and in light of the judgment and recommendations of the Indian Supreme Court. And we are asking, and our civil society is requiring, that there should be no check at all on free speech, and false speech should be allowed. These are my questions as a law student.
Sir, I absolutely understand your point. You've mentioned that there have to be checks and balances, there has to be regulation, and how there's precedent available from different jurisdictions where criminalization has also been introduced. But don't you think there are less stringent measures of regulation and checks and balances instead of like going for criminalization? Isn't that too extreme?
Yeah, I agree. There should be little liberal approach to deal with such digital spaces and digital media, because we are facing an evolution of technology in our lives. Everything is coming into a digital ecosystem. Our lives to a digital payment system, digital ecosystem, digital. We are living in a digital ecosystem right now. So there should be a liberal approach, but there should be a rules, a regulatory framework as well to digital media platforms, which cannot affect the political will Like in Australia and Canada, they are discussing how use of metadata or big data can disturb the free exercise of political rights, right to vote. So if those civilized countries are thinking how digital ecosystem and big data and data sciences, artificial intelligence is being used in digital space, robo accounts. So these are things which are left unchecked. And the Honorable Islamabad High Court, I believe there might be some issue of assistance from the technical side. The Honorable Islamabad High Court should have appointed a technical expert, like an information technology ICT expert or data scientist or an AI expert, how digital spaces can be used uh, to promote false speech without involving human beings. So for human beings directly being checked or penalized for any wrong, for any innocent action. So in civilized jurisdiction, a single tweet or single Facebook post cannot have an impact. We should see the outreach, how that a single post is reached to the masses. Not, and that again, there is a definition of digital media influencer. Every person having 200-300 followers or friends, he can't be an influencer. If he's posting, that has a different impact. But if a person having 1 million followers, he or she is posting something false or bad, which have a bigger impact, there should be a different mechanism. So our law have a lot of issues. Those issues should be checked first. We should have a new framework considering all the factors, our social norms, our civil society rights, our journalist, our democracy. So all these factors should be inclusive in that legal framework. We don't have a data protection law. We don't have a privacy law. So that is also a dark side of our legal framework. If we don't have a personal privacy rights protection, we don't have data protection law, private or public data, even we don't have any law to protect the digital data lying with the NADRA or our telecom companies. So in absence of data protection law, privacy law, digital privacy law, such problems will occur. And I drafted a law in 2005, digital protection, and this is 2021. We have almost seventh or eighth draft. We are still missing a data protection and privacy law. So that is also a dark side. That is creating more problems in regulating or governing the digital space and digital media.
Thank you, sir, for your elaborate response. While you've rightly highlighted that even this Peca Ordinance needs a lot of restructuring. But if we consider the law as of now, the Islamabad High Court has ruled that this is unconstitutional and ultra vires. So just for the sake of an analysis and having your legal perspective on this, do you think this decision of the Islamabad High Court in better and more politically stable times would be challenged before the Supreme Court? And what would be the way forward as per, if we look from the government's perspective, according to you?
Unless I have detailed reasons, the short order is not, in my humble view, the short order is a bad example of declaring a law ultra vires. The basis of that law, that was an ordinance, a legislative or administrative basis may be relevant here, that why there was a need to promulgate an ordinance, why there was not a proper law by the parliament, by the legislature, passed by the parliament after due deliberation, after due consultation of all the parties, instead of having a legislation by the parliament, why there was a need to promulgate an ordinance in a hurry without any consultative process. That is a different side. The other side, whether that law is ultra vires on the ground of Article 19. In short order, the Honorable Judge was not clear enough, in my view, because the reason given that is ultra vires under Article 19, 19A, that's all that for the reason to be recorded. So I will be waiting for the detailed reasons. Uh, then I will be in a position whether it should be challenged or not. But instead of declaring, like earlier, the social media rules, digital media rules were introduced, those were challenged, and the government was given a chance to deliberate upon, have a consultative process. So, till date, all those civil society proponents and very genius brains from all the spheres of the society, they have not come up with a counter proposal. They have not come up with a legislative framework or regulatory framework, a governance, digital media governance framework. So, if that is wrong, if Peca is wrong, what should be the possible framework to deal with such situations? So, I believe all civil society concerned citizens should sit together, they should structure something and propose to the legislature. And one thing more, which is very pertinent to tell here, that uh, in Pakistan we have a Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan. Mr. Justice Atar Manila, he is member, being Chief Justice of Islamabad High Court, he is member of Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan. In all over the world, whenever there is a new situation, a new legislative framework is introduced, or an old framework is redundant or having issues, law commission of that country, like Indian Law Commission, like Law and Justice Commission of UK, US, there are Law and Justice Commission all over the world in most of the civilized society. Like in Pakistan, it has a huge budget. The Chief Justice of Pakistan is the chairman of that Law and Justice Commission, having membership from all the provinces, all the Chief Justices, Attorney General, Secretary Law, and independent jurists are also members. So the forum is not to discuss such. These laws should be evaluated, assessed, and counter proposals should come from Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan, instead of our judiciary always declaring laws ultra vires. Why don't they propose? Don't they use the appropriate forum to propose the parliament what should be the law? That is the job of Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan. And unfortunately, from 2012 2017 there was no meeting held by the Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan. From 2017 till 2020, few meetings, few proposals. So that is our problem. The right institutions are not working what they are supposed to do. The parliament, the judiciary, and the executive. In present days, the trichotomy of power is disturbed. That is my view. If they are declaring anything, so they should be declaring or assessing or proposing from the appropriate forum, Law Commission.
A very pertinent point, sir, you've raised there. So that brings me towards the end of the session. And it was a very intellectually stimulating session with a different perspective. That is something that we don't get to see very often on mainstream media. And thank you, sir, for bringing, for enlightening us and bringing this to the table as well. As Sir Khurram has rightly mentioned, there is room and a lot of room for digital media governance, and this provides the civil society an opportunity to come together and work towards legislative reform in this area. Nevertheless, the Peca Ordinance 2022 has been declared unconstitutional, and as we wait for the reasoned and official judgment of the Islamabad High Court, it is time for us to deliberate that what will be the way forward for us as a society, for us as law students, and for us as young practitioners. I would like to thank our audience who've tuned in, and I hope you find this session beneficial as well. Thank you so much, Sir Khurram, for your time, and with that, we move towards the end of the session.
Thank you.